This is the IB Math Studies Final Exam Spring 2018 review for paper number 2. Question number 1 gives us a scatter plot. This is from topic number 4. And the first question, which will be on the next slide, asks us to find A and B. So we're given for A, we're given a y coordinate of 89. So if you go up the y to 89, you can find that the x coordinate is 4.2-ish. And then for B, you're given an x coordinate of 8.6. So if you go there and go up, you find the y coordinate is 74. So then if you fill those in for A and B, you can put in your graphing calculator. L1 would be your x coordinate, the distance. L2 would be the y coordinate, the concentration. And then you want to do stat 2 variable statistics. And so then you find your x mean to be 5.91 and your y mean to be 88. Then you want to go back into stat, calculate linear regression, and your correlation coefficient should be turned on, and it should be negative 0.956. So then if you want to write down the correlation coefficient of y on x, you're still at that same slide. So you end up with this data that your graphing calculator gives you. So your linear regression is y equals negative 5.39x plus 120. So then they give you some information about Ernesto's school, and they want to calculate the value of Ernesto's estimate. So you plug in 14 for x because distance is x, and you get 44.5. But it is not a reliable estimate because 14 is not within the data set that they give you. The only way you can use your linear regression is if it's within the range of data values that they already give you, and this is not, so it's not reliable. Number 2 is a topic number 3 question. So we have some set theory and we have some probability. So they give us a bunch of information about students who download music, films, and books, and they want us to write a Venn diagram for it. So here's our Venn diagram. You need the rectangle on the outside, don't forget, and then in this case 3 circles for books, music, and films. And then fill in the information that you know. Make sure you don't double count anything. And then there's 25 out here that don't download anything. Calculate the number of students who are surveyed, so then you're just going to add it all up. This is the number in the entire universe. So you're going to total up all of this, and you end up 160 students were surveyed. So then number C, part 1, asks you to shade on the Venn diagram the set F or M and not B. So that's the students who downloaded music and film but did not also download books. So that's anybody in just music in this section in here that they overlap, or just film, but nothing that's inside the circle of B. And then part 2 says find the number in there. So if you add these 3 circles up, you end up with 65. Part D wants us to find the probability if you pick one student at random that for number 1, students downloaded music. So you total up all the students who downloaded music out of the 160 students surveyed, and you end up with 0.625 or 62.5%. Double I, the students who downloaded books, given they did not download film. So the students who did not download film, that's everybody not in this circle here. So if you total all that up, you get 65 students did not download films. And out of those 65 students, 20 of them downloaded books, so your percentage is 30.8%. Triple I, the students who downloaded at least 2 products, so that's anybody in these center parts right here. So if you add all those up, that's 90 out of 160, which is 56.3%. And then they tell us that the school has 850 students, and they wanted us to find the expected number of students who downloaded music. So we found that the probability that students downloaded music was 62.5%. So if you multiply that by the 850 students total, you end up about 531 students download music. Number 3 is a topic number 1, 6, and 7 question because we're modeling with quadratics and using some calculus. So they give us a function for the height of a flare at c over time in seconds. So part A wants us to find the height for which the flare was fired. Well, at the time the flare was fired, that's time equals 0. So if you plug in 0 for t, you get that the height when it was fired was 12 meters. Part B wants us to find the height after 15 seconds. So if you plug in 15 for t, you end up with 207 meters. The flare fell into the sea at k after k seconds, so find the value of k. So if you plug in k, and then if it fell into the sea, that means it's at sea level, so that means the height is equal to 0. So if you use your graphing calculator, graph this function, and then find the 0, or find where it intersects with y equals 0, either way, you end up with 80.7 seconds. Part D wants us to find h prime of t, so again, power rule here. Bring the power down in front, you end up with negative 0.4 t, reduce the power by 1, plus 16. EI wants us to find, or it says it's a maximum after 40 seconds, or to prove that it's a maximum after 40 seconds. So a maximum occurs when your derivative is equal to 0, so we set our derivative equal to 0, and you solve this for t and you end up with 40 seconds. And they want us to actually calculate the maximum height. So the height is your original function, not your derivative. So if we plug in 40 into our original set function, you end up with the maximum height of the flare is 332 meters. The last question says determine the total length the flare can be seen if it can be seen for more than, if it's above 40 meters. So in my graphing calculator, I graphed this function, the original function h they give us, and I graphed y equals 40 and found the two places that they intersected, which is at 1.79 and 78.2 seconds. So then if you subtract these, the total time that the Coast Guard can see it is 76.4 seconds. Number 4 is the topic 5 question. We have some three-dimensional geometry and some trigonometry. So they give us this pyramid here, and they give us some information about angle measurements and side measurements, and they want us to find this distance VM in part A, or just show that it's 186 meters. So we have a right triangle here. If you look at VM ABV, we know this angle here is 58.3 degrees. So we have this right triangle right here. So if we use some right triangle trig, we know this angle down here, B, and we know this side length is half of 230, so it's 115, and we're trying to find this. So we find that the tangent of 58.3 degrees is this distance VM that we're trying to solve for over 115. So if you multiply 115 to both sides, you end up with this long calculator answer, which simplifies down to 186 meters. So part B wants us to calculate the height VO. So we have another right triangle here. VMO is a right triangle. And we know this distance MO is half the distance of the side, so it would be 115 meters. And we just found this distance VM. So if you use Pythagorean theorem, you end up with the height VO is 146 meters. Part C wants us to find the volume of the pyramid. On our formula booklet, we have the volume of the pyramid is 1/3 the area of the base times the height. So the area of the base, it's a square, so it would just be 230 squared. So you end up with 2,570,000 meters cubed. And then part D wants us to write our answer in standard form. So 2.57 times 10 to the 6, because you move your decimal place over 6 places. So Ahmed made this claim about the volume of the pyramid, that you could make it stretch out to be a wall that's 5 meters high, 1 meter wide, and stretches to Paris, or from Paris to Amsterdam, which is 430 kilometers. So what I did is I found the volume of what that wall would be. So the 5 meters high times the 1 meter wide, and then times the 430 kilometers, but I changed kilometers into meters. So I ended up that the volume of this wall that he's talking about would be 2,150,000. So the volume of the pyramid is bigger than that, so then yes, that would make a wall that would stretch that distance. So then question number 4 continues. They talk about sitting in the shadow. So they give us this triangle here that's a shadow. And for part F, they want us to calculate the length of AW in the mid-afternoon. So we know this side is 230, and they gave us this side here is 160, and they gave us this angle is 15 degrees. So we have a side angle side triangle, which is law of cosines. So plug everything into the law of cosines, and you find that AW is 86.1 meters. And then part I wants us to find the area of the shadow. So again, we have a side angle side triangle. So area would be 1/2 AB sine gamma, or AB sine C. So plug in the two sides, plug in your angle, and you end up with the area of the shadow is 4,760 meters squared. Number 5 is a topic number 1 question. We're talking about sequences and series. So they give us two salary plans, And part A wants us to calculate how much money they would make on the second year of the plan. So for Antonio, he would make 8,000 plus the 450, so he'd make 8,450 euros. And Barbara would make 8,000 times 1.05. If it's 5%, that means she has 105% of what she had the year before, so she'd make 8,400 euros. Part B wants us to write an expression for both of these. So for Antonio, part I, it's arithmetic. This is on your formula booklet. So plug in our common difference is 450, and our first term is 8,000. So you get A sub n is equal to 8,000 plus 450 n minus 1. And then again, part 2, or double I, Barbara, is geometric. This is on your formula booklet. So U sub 1 is again 8,000, and your common ratio is 1.05. So you end up with B sub n is equal to 8,000, 1.05, and to the n minus 1. Part C wants to know how many years it takes for Barbara to pass Antonio, or how long is Antonio greater than or equal to Barbara. So I graphed these two on my graphing calculator and found where they intersect. So for the first 6 years, Antonio is making more or equal to money, and then on the 7th year, Barbara passes him. So then part D wants us to find the total amount of money Barbara makes during these 15 years for part I. So that is a geometric sum. So plug it in, all your information, U sub 1, R is 1.05, N is 15. And you end up for the first 15 years, she makes 173,000 euros. And then part double I wants us the same question, but for Antonio. So this is the sum formula for an arithmetic sequence. Plug in your information. Again, N is 15, and D is 450. And you end up with 167,250. So Antonio earns less money than Barbara does over 15 years. So last question, number 6, is a topic 7 question. We have some calculus. So they give us this function f of x, and they want us to calculate f of 0. So that just means plugging in 0 for x. So plug this in, and you end up with a negative 1. And then use your graphing calculator to solve f of x equals 0. So I put this in for y sub 1 and found the 0, and you end up with two answers, negative 0.538 and also 3. Part C wants you to sketch this. So when you're sketching it, you don't need, it's just a quick sketch. It doesn't have to be great. What I did is I actually graphed this on my graphing calculator, making my window be this. And then I use this information here and this information here, and I sketched a graph that way. And then down here it says that f is the derivative of a function g. So this is the derivative of some other function that we don't know. All we know is that g sub 1 is 3. So we want to calculate g prime of 1. So that means that that's the same thing as f of 1. So if you plug in 1, you end up with negative 1.5. And part double I wants us to find the tangent line at 1. So they give us the y coordinate at 1, and we just found the slope at 1. So plug in that information, and then I put it into point slope form, and then solved it into slope intercept form. So you end up with y equals negative 1.5x plus 4.5. So this has been the review video for the final exam, paper 2.